In the Peruvian desert, there's a spider the size of a football field. A hummingbird longer than a commercial airplane. And a monkey with a spiral tail that could wrap around a city block. These aren't myths. They're real. Carved into the earth over 2,000 years ago by people who supposedly had no way to see their own creations. After decades of wild theories, scientists have finally cracked the code. And what they discovered is far stranger than aliens. The Nazca Lines were first spotted in 1927 when commercial airlines began flying over southern Peru. Pilots looked down and couldn't believe what they were seeing. Etched into the rust-colored desert were hundreds of enormous figures, animals, plants, geometric shapes, stretching for miles across the landscape. Some were simple lines running perfectly straight for kilometers. Others were intricate designs requiring sophisticated planning. The obvious question haunted everyone who saw them: how could an ancient civilization create art they could never actually see? This wasn't just curious. It was impossible. Or so everyone thought. But the real mystery wasn't how they made them. It was why. And that question would take nearly a century to answer. Let's address the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the alien in the spaceship. For decades, the most popular explanation for the Nazca Lines wasn't archaeological at all. It was extraterrestrial. In 1968, Erich von Daniken published Chariots of the Gods, claiming these lines were ancient runways for alien spacecraft. The theory exploded across popular culture. After all, how else could primitive people create images only visible from the sky unless they had visitors who could fly? It was seductive logic. And completely wrong. It is what von Daniken missed: the Nazca people weren't primitive at all. They were engineering geniuses. And we can prove it. The evidence has been hiding in plain sight this entire time, waiting for us to look closer. The first breakthrough came from understanding exactly what these lines are made of. The Nazca Pampa is one of the driest places on Earth. Almost no rain. Almost no wind. The surface is covered with dark, iron oxide-rich pebbles that have oxidized over millennia, creating a reddish-brown layer. Beneath this layer? Pale yellow-gray earth. The Nazca people didn't add anything to create their lines. They simply removed the dark surface stones and piled them along the edges, exposing the lighter ground beneath. That's it. No alien technology. No mysterious knowledge. Used patient, methodical work. And because this desert has remained virtually unchanged for thousands of years, their creations have survived. But here's what's remarkable: some of these figures required removing millions of stones. The spider alone took an estimated 5,000 hours of labor. So what drove them to such extraordinary effort? In 2019, a team of Japanese researchers from Yamagata University made a discovery that changed everything. Using AI-enhanced satellite imagery, they identified 143 previously unknown geoglyphs. But these weren't like the famous ones. They were smaller. More intimate. And they depicted something unexpected: humans. Decapitated humans. Figures holding severed heads. Warriors with trophy skulls. The sanitized image of peaceful astronomical observers creating pretty pictures suddenly got a lot darker. These weren't just artistic expressions. They were telling stories of violence, sacrifice, and ritual power. The team realized the lines operated on multiple scales: massive figures meant to be seen from mountains, and smaller ones meant for people walking among them. The Nazca weren't trying to communicate with the sky. They were trying to communicate with their gods. And their gods demanded blood. It is where it gets fascinating. Archaeologist David Johnson spent years walking the Nazca Desert, and he noticed something others had missed. Many of the lines didn't just make pictures. They pointed to something. Following the lines on foot, Johnson discovered they consistently led to one thing: water sources. Underground aquifers. Natural springs. Seasonal streams. In one of Earth's most arid regions, the Nazca had created a giant map to the most precious resource imaginable. The lines weren't art. They were infrastructure. Think about what this means. A civilization facing constant drought created a system of pathways that would guide their people to water for generations. The giant animals? They weren't random. Many were water-associated creatures in Nazca mythology: the hummingbird, the whale, the pelican. Each figure was a giant billboard saying, "This way to survival." But wait. If these were just water maps, why make them so elaborate? Why create art instead of simple arrows? This is where understanding ancient thinking becomes crucial. For the Nazca, water wasn't just a resource. It was divine. Their gods controlled the rain, the rivers, the underground streams. To access water was to access the sacred. The elaborate figures weren't wasteful decoration. They were religious offerings. Each geoglyph was a prayer etched into the earth itself, visible to the mountain gods who sent the water. And here's the stunning part: the Nazca walked these lines. Archaeological evidence shows paths worn into the figures from repeated ritual processions. Imagine hundreds of people walking the outline of a massive hummingbird, their footsteps a moving prayer, their bodies literally tracing sacred geometry into existence. The lines weren't meant to be seen from above. They were meant to be experienced from within. German mathematician Maria Rieck dedicated her entire life to studying the Nazca Lines, living in a small hut on the Pampa for over 50 years. Her theory was astronomical. The lines were a giant calendar, marking solstices, equinoxes, and star positions. For decades, this was the accepted academic explanation. But when astronomer Gerald Hawkins tested her theory with computer analysis in 1968, he found something troubling. The alignments were no better than random chance. If you draw enough lines in any direction, some will inevitably point at celestial events. Rieck's theory, while elegant, didn't hold up to statistical scrutiny. Yet she wasn't entirely wrong. Some figures do align with significant astronomical events, just not all of them. The truth was more complex. The Nazca used multiple systems simultaneously. And this complexity would take modern technology to finally unravel. In 2015, researchers made a discovery that unified all the competing theories. Using drone-mounted LiDAR, laser scanning that can map terrain in incredible detail, they found the geoglyphs weren't randomly placed at all. They clustered around two specific locations, the Cahuachi Ceremonial Center and the town of Ventilla. Cahuachi was the Vatican of the Nazca world, a massive pilgrimage site with 40 mounds, pyramids, and plazas. The lines radiated outward from this sacred center like spokes on a wheel. People from across the region would travel to Cahuachi for religious festivals, walking the geoglyph lines as part of their journey. The figures weren't scattered art. They were a road system. A sacred highway network connecting communities to their spiritual center. And at the heart of that center, archaeologists found something that explained everything: the remains of massive water rituals. At Cahuachi, archaeologists uncovered evidence of catastrophic climate change. Around 500 CE, the Nazca civilization experienced a severe drought that lasted decades. Tree-ring data confirms it. Soil samples confirm it. And the archaeological record shows a civilization in crisis. The geoglyph construction intensified dramatically during this period. As water became scarcer, the Nazca didn't abandon their giant figures. They made more of them. Bigger ones. More elaborate ones. This wasn't irrational behavior. It was desperate faith. If the gods controlled water, and the gods demanded offerings, then the solution to drought was more offerings. More ritual walking. More sacred geometry carved into the earth. The Nazca lines aren't just ancient art. They're a record of a civilization fighting for survival against forces they couldn't understand. And eventually losing. Now here's the question nobody expected: how did they make them so accurately without seeing them from above? The answer is surprisingly simple, and we've proven it works. In 1982, Joe Nickell recreated a Nazca condor using only tools available to the ancient Nazca. No surveying equipment. No computers. Just stakes, cord, and basic geometry. His team completed a full-scale geoglyph in just 2 days. The method: create a small-scale drawing, then use a grid system to scale it up section by section. Each worker only needs to see their small area. The overall design emerges from coordinated labor. It's the same principle used to create Roman mosaics or medieval tapestries. The Nazca weren't using mysterious technology. They were using something far more powerful: organizational genius and collective effort. They proved that humans, working together with simple tools, can achieve the seemingly impossible. But the Nazca story doesn't end with their collapse. In 2020, during the COVID pandemic, researchers finally had time to analyze data that had been collected but never processed. The result was staggering. The number of known geoglyphs jumped from about 30 major figures to over 190. And they're still finding more. Last year alone, AI analysis identified 21 previously unknown humanoid figures, all depicting ritual activities. The desert is still giving up its secrets. Even more remarkably, the figures span at least 700 years of continuous creation. Generations of Nazca people added to this landscape, each contributing their prayers, their hopes, their fears. What we're looking at isn't one message. It's a library. Thousands of years of human experience written in earth and stone, waiting for us to read it. So what have we actually learned? The Nazca Lines weren't alien runways or mysterious messages to extraterrestrials. They were something far more profound, a civilization's desperate, beautiful attempt to communicate with forces beyond their understanding. To find water in a dying landscape. To connect with gods who seem to have abandoned them. To walk sacred paths hoping their footsteps might somehow be heard. The real revelation isn't about aliens or ancient technology. It's about human beings facing existential crisis and responding with creativity, fight, and extraordinary collective effort. 2,000 years later, we still walk their paths. We still ask their questions. We still look to the sky wondering if anyone is listening. Perhaps that's the true purpose of the Nazca Lines, to remind us that some mysteries aren't problems to be solved. They're experiences to be shared across time. The Nazca Lines remind us that our ancestors weren't primitive. They were problem solvers, artists, and believers who moved mountains of stone to speak to the heavens. If you want to explore more ancient mysteries that science has finally cracked, subscribe and hit that bell. Next week, we're investigating another impossible structure that scientists thought couldn't exist. Until then, keep questioning. Keep wondering. And never stop looking for lost knowledge revealed.